One of my friends at school, at Salisbury, had an older sister, and she had Picturegoer. So I discovered Picturegoer through Bridget. See, I remember her name. And I had a bit of a thing for Bridget. She was like 2 years older. Yeah, so that's how I discovered it, and I persuaded my parents to subscribe, to add it to their newspaper subscription. Like the rest of the world, I loved these movie stars of the 40s and 50s, but there was one face you never saw in movies at that time, not until Charles Chauvel's landmark film, Jedda. It's the story of an Aboriginal girl, Jedda, adopted by a white family, raising her on their cattle station as a European.
But I still think it's our duty to try and do something with them. Bring them closer to our way of living.
Charles Chauvel, the Australian director who first cast Errol Flynn in a movie, was a maverick filmmaker. Together with his wife, Elsa, they made Jedda in the period when there was no funding for Australian films.
Dreaming again?
You know, Buddy, sometimes I dream I'm out there with them. Maybe I will go one day, just for fun.
Oh, Jedda, whatever would you do out in the bush with all those naked monkeys?
I remember the startling experience of seeing Jedda in a cinema in England. The subject was amazing and critiqued prevailing attitudes of the day. The Chauvels had to raise the film's entire budget themselves. They were offered $100,000 from an American studio to cast a Hollywood screen siren who would have been blacked up for the leading role. But Charles refused to compromise. He cast Rosalie Kunoth-Monks as Jedda and Robert Tudor-Wally as Marbuk. Both were from the Northern Territory. Why was it controversial?
Well, I think it was controversial because my grandfather had the idea of casting two unknown Aboriginal people in the lead roles, and that was just not thought of in the mid-50s.
It must be fun to dance a crockery. Real wild fellow one.
Charles went to Menzies at the time to see what sort of assistance he could get, and Menzies was very, very scathing of the whole idea. And a lot of media people at the time and industry people said, you know, you'll never make a film again. It'll be death at the box office. And I think in some way, I think that even propelled my grandfather even more to make this film.
You have to remember that when Jedda was made, the indigenous people of this country were not even listed among the population. They were part of the flora and fauna. No one else was presenting an Aboriginal man and a young Aboriginal woman as worthy of admiration and being seen as beautiful.
I remember seeing Jedda when I was really young and then seeing it again when I was sort of older and in the industry. I mean, Rosalie Kunoth-Monks is brilliant in it, and so is Robert Tudor-Wally. But it's a very odd film. When you look at it, the indigenous characters, they've been dubbed over and they're just someone's going, you know, and that's meant to be them speaking. So I just look at that and I'm so appalled by that laziness that the filmmakers had. So there's some challenges with that film, but it was of its time.
Despite its flaws, Jedda is a remarkable film, not only because it was the first Australian feature with Indigenous leads, but also because it was the first Australian feature in colour. And the first ever Australian film to be invited to Cannes, where it competed for the coveted Palme d'Or.
Films of that era were meant to have a happy ending. To have a tragic ending like that left something in people's minds for years to come.
So let the howling wind start blowing, let the raindrops keep on flowing.
Half a century after Jedda, an Indigenous-led Australian film did win awards at Cannes and around the world. That film is Samson and Delilah. A deeply moving love story between two teenagers in a remote Aboriginal community from an unflinching Indigenous director, Warwick Thornton. Samson and Delilah was, I thought, a very confronting film.
Mm-hmm.
Did you set out to make a confronting film?
No, but yes. I had these two characters. I'm going to write a petrol sniffer's love story. It is an incredibly dark film. I'd be bullshitting not only to those two characters, I'd be bullshitting to Australia if I was to make that film any lighter.
Warwick Thornton grew up in Alice Springs. After a troubled adolescence, he made a number of successful short films and built a career as a cinematographer. Samson and Delilah was his first film as a director, a film based in the truth of his own experience and made in his own cinematic language.
So we won't rehearse this. You see that Samson's moved his bed near yours.
I'm a writer, I'm a wordsmith, and here comes this beautiful, largely silent story in which, you know, the narrative is absolutely clear. When you're learning your craft, you hear cinema is a form of storytelling which the story is told in images. And you go, well, yeah, I get that, but what does that actually mean? You see a film like Samson and Delilah and go, that's what it means.
Samson and Delilah, in some ways, its beautiful simplicity is its power.
Extraordinary performances from both those kids. The boy dancing, I thought, was just incredible.
Some films can rise to being what you can safely classify as a work of art.
The film depicts Indigenous dispossession and the struggle to deal with the ongoing impact of colonisation. When Samson and Delilah leave their remote community, they become further marginalised within the broader society.
There I actually learnt something for the first time, that I'm looking at a culture that is struggling in their own land, and the horror is quite overwhelming.
When pain is truly there for a reason because of the truth of the story and the truth of history in our existence, and Australia stands up and watches it, that's so powerful and so beautiful.
Yeah. It's one of my all-time favourite Australian films. Almost kind of Shakespearean on some level, you know, the take on huge subjects like truth and justice and give it to me in a way that feels very human.
The characters started dictating to me when I was writing what happens. Well, one of them should really die because they've been through so much abuse. And I had these two characters, Samson and Delilah, going, we fought this hard, we fought this strong, and we've been through so much shit. How dare you try and kill us off? We're going to live.
In a sense, the kids in the movie are a parallel for Indigenous filmmaking in this country, rising up to be counted.
Warwick Thornton's Samson and Delilah was a catalyst for Indigenous filmmaking and absolutely opened the floodgates for people to go, wow, look at this, another way of storytelling.
Those characters resonated so powerfully. But, you know, it's not depressingly bleak. It gives you something to hang on to, which is tremendously important.
To give time to a story like that and to tell it that way, a bit of a game changer for cinema. Should have won an Oscar.
Although it was acclaimed around the world, Samson and Delilah was made for Australians to see an invisible Australia. The film premiered in Alice Springs at an outdoor screening by the Todd River. It was one of the most mixed black and white crowds outside football ever seen. The authenticity of the story is important because, for me, Even if films are confronting, they have a right to be seen.